All right, so now that we know what trig ratios are, we're going to find side lengths using the trig. All right, so I'm going to start by writing up at the top. S stands for sine, and that is the opposite over the hypotenuse. C stands for cosine, which is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And T stands for tangent, which is the opposite over the adjacent. All right, so this time we're actually going to find a side length. So step one, okay? Actually, let me get my Desmos ready for you guys. All right, here we go. So step number one, circle the angle. So we have a right triangle here, and we're going to identify where our perspective is from. My perspective is from the 28 degrees here. From there, you're going to label given sides with an O, an A, or an H. So this 19 that we're given is the hypotenuse of the triangle, so I'm going to label it with an H. The X over here, even though it's not given, that's what I'm solving for, so I have to make sure I use it, is the opposite. So I know I'm going to use sine because I have the O and the H. So here's what we're going to plug it into. Okay, you're going to pick your trig ratio. Okay, so in this case, we have sine, and then we have parentheses always. Inside the parenthesis will always be our angle. All right, so the sine of, what is the angle we're working with? 28. Equals something over something. So it's either going to be O over H if you're using sine, A over H if you're using cosine, and O over A if you're using tangent. So since I'm using sine, sine of 28 is going to be equal to X over 19. And that's how we set it up. Okay, so from here, we're just going to multiply. We're going to solve for X. Now you can look at this as it is over 1. So just like last chapter, we're going to cross multiply. All right, so X times 1 gives me X all by itself. Now I'm multiplying the sine of 28 times 19. And the sine of 28 is not just 28, it's not just sine. These stay together. Okay, so I'm going to pull out, I'm going to say 19 times the sine of 28 degrees. And that's exactly what X is. So from there, sorry, let me do my phone. Okay, you are in Desmos, and we're going to plug it in just like this. So how do we do it? 19 times, now if you click the function button, it's going to bring up all sorts of stuff, and we're already in the trig section. So we're taking the sine, we're using that very first one, and you can see, oops, I arrowed my cursor over. It opens up the parentheses already. So you just enter in your degree. Okay, so we get 5.14 rounded to the nearest tenth. X equals 5.1. And I apologize, I forgot to do one thing with you guys. Okay, so before you use Desmos, you have to hit this little wrench up here and switch it to degrees. Okay, we work with degrees, we don't work with radians. So as you can see, I actually get a different answer. I forgot to switch my own calculator. Okay, you have to have it in degrees in order to get these correct. So my actual value for X is equal to 8.9. All right, so again, that is the wrench. It will probably be in radians down here. So you click on degrees, and that's how you will enter it in here. All right, so let's finish out these. So label given sides. The step 3 is to choose the ratio. Step 4 is to plug in angle and set equal to the ratio. So here we go. Let's follow these steps. Step 1 is to circle the angle we have. Step 2 is to label with either an O, A, or H. So X that I'm trying to solve is an O. The 32 that I'm given is the adjacent. It's not the hypotenuse because it's not across from the 90. we choose the appropriate trig ratio. O and A goes with tangent, the T. So the tangent of how many degrees? 41 is equal to something over something. Well, since I'm doing tangent, it's going to be O over A. The opposite, which is X, over the adjacent, which is 32. We cross multiply. You'll pick up on a pattern. When X is on top, you just multiply the denominator times tangent of 41. This whole thing gets multiplied together. All right, so 32, function. Okay, that little function button. The third one down is tangent. The degree is 41. Equals 27.8. All right, so a lot of the problems will be set up just like this. It's the same problem, same way to solve once you get the correct ratio. Now, number 6 is when it gets a little tricky. Okay, so we still go through the same process. It's the solving part that gets tricky. So I circle my angle. From there, I'm going to label my 26 is the hypotenuse. My X is the adjacent. A and H go with cosine. Cosine of 21 is equal to the adjacent. Just kidding, this is not over the hypotenuse. I cross multiply. X is equal to 26 cosine of 21. Plug this in. 26 function cosine, 21 degrees, 24.2. Awesome. So now I'm going to skip down to here because this is where it gets trickier just in the solving. All right, we don't know it's tricky until we set it up. I circle my angle. I label 15 with an O. X is the hypotenuse. OH. OH goes with sine. Sine of 33 degrees equals 15 over X. So first, let's figure out why this one is different. Well, this time, our X is on bottom. Why is that tricky? Well, when I multiply across, I get the sine of 33 times X is equal to this 15 times 1. Now, we don't have X alone like we did before, okay? So I'm going to remind you the sine of 33 is a package deal. So to get X all by itself, I'm actually going to divide by the sine of 33, which means I divide this by the sine of 33. We cancel these out, and X is equal to 15 divided by the sine of 33. Okay, so we plug it into our calculator just like that. 15 divided by function sine 33. I get 27.5. All right, let's try this again. Circle here, I have an adjacent and a hypotenuse. So the cosine of 43 degrees equals 36 over X. Well, I'm going to give you a hint. What happened when I did this? Well, what ends up happening is these guys trade spots. Okay, X ends up going out here. The 36 stays put, and I divide it by the cosine of 43. So when X is on top, we just multiply. When X is on bottom, we have to take our number and divide it by the trig ratio. So I'm just going to delete some of these. All right, so now we have 36 divided by the function of cosine of 43 degrees. And we get X equals 49.2. All right, so that is it. So feel free if you're stuck, pause the video. Biggest thing, remember, you always, when it's sine, it's always opposite over hypotenuse. This is always adjacent over the hypotenuse. O is opposite over the adjacent.